Hey crafty friends, this is Jenny from crafttestamies.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make this double eclipse wreath card. It's a double eclipse because you die cut it twice. And remember the one that I showed you how to make the other day with the cabbage roses? Well, we're doing the same idea, but this time we're going to use markers to achieve the watercolor look instead of actual paints. So let's get started. So you are going to want to use watercolor paper, and this is a cold press, which means it's a little bumpy, which I kind of like. And you're going to need some water-based markers, and I'm using these SAIs from Japan. You could use Zigs, you could use Artezas, you could probably use Tombos. I just like these little brush ones because they have a super fine tip, and that gives me a lot of control. You're also going to need a little paintbrush and some water, or a water brush with a fine tip, and I used a stencil to create the heart shape. Again, I'm using a heart shape. You could use any shape you want, but we're going to start off by making these cabbage roses. And you know my technique, I hopefully by now, which is little comma, little comma, little comma, followed by big parenthesis, big parenthesis, big parenthesis. And sound effects may or may not be included. So you can see it again. I'm just making little commas, little commas, little commas, and then they get progressively bigger. And as they do, I use a little bit of water to kind of bleed them out and pull the color to the outside. One little tip about making cabbage roses is we never look at them straight down, so it's never perfectly centered. They always are kind of off in one direction. So if you think about the rose as a circle, it's always going to be kind of to the outside facing one direction or another. Now, if you get a little bit too much water on there, like I have done, you can go ahead and just use a paper towel to kind of blot up the excess and then add a little more down if you want. The nice thing about watercolor is that it's pretty forgiving. You can layer it, and I will suggest that, if you keep a paper towel on hand, you are going to be in good shape. Now you're always going to see that I like to layer two colors. Sometimes I just do a darker version and a lighter version in the pink. Then I kind of felt like, I don't know, it was just it was lacking something. So I started to add a little bit of an orange. So don't be afraid to mix a few colors too. No two of your roses are going to be exactly the same, and that's okay. We kind of want them to feel painterly and really loose, because what you end up seeing is the overall effect. You're not really looking at every single little leaf. But I'm kind of going around and just showing you how I fill up the heart with the roses. Now, can I just give you some advice? Do something different than what I did. And that is start and move around in the opposite direction of your dominant hand. I kind of started and then I was working around clockwise, and of course, if your paints are still wet, you're going to drag your hand through your wet paint. So start on the opposite side and then work towards your dominant hand, just so that you have less of a chance of dragging your hand through your wet work. Or keep a little dryer handy, a blow dryer or a heat tool to kind of dry things as you go. So now what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of traveling music, and you can finish watching me fill in the roses at an even faster speed. Ooh, exciting. So now I'm back, and it's time to add a little bit of green, and I like to add some leaves and some other little kind of flower type things. So to create those, I'm just making very, very basic leaf shapes. They're just like two commas facing each other with a little bit of fill in the middle. And then I go in with my water brush and just drag the color around. And I'm not really great at making the leaves. I'm going to be honest about that. They look a little lame, but I'm kind of going for the overall effect. And I think if you're doing this, don't be too hard on yourself. Just practice and have fun with it, because again, it's just part of the overall effect. You can also add some just like little squiggles coming out as if they were little wisps of wild grasses or little tendrils. So I added a few of those in, and then I'm going to actually add a few more colors too. I kind of felt like it needed a little something, so I took a blue pen. Now, why blue? I don't know. It just felt like the right thing, and I added little sets of 3 berries, and this kind of gives it almost like a little country cottage look. But just added the little dots of berries. I didn't end up diluting these or adding the water brush at all. They were just like little, like I said, just the little dots. And then to add a little bit more filling in, I added little purple hearts. And again, they could be like little sprigs or little flowers, but I just added them randomly, a few on the outside, a few on the inside, to add a little something extra. So this is again just kind of how I did it, but basically you've got roses, leaves, little berries, and little hearts, and that's kind of the extent of it. Now, because I know I'm doing this with the Eclipse technique, I felt like, well, first of all, you see my big spludge in the middle. I had to cover that up. But I also wanted to have a little more color. I wanted to cover up kind of that off-white background. So I took my yellow marker, I scribbled it on a ceramic tile, I added some water, and now I'm just creating a wash kind of in the inside of the heart, and I'm going to go around and do the same thing on the outside. And just to help the outside blend a little more, I'm adding just a little puddle of water around the outside, and then I'm dipping back into that puddle of yellow water that I made. And now that I say that out loud, that wasn't the best thing to call it. But now I'm giving that a wash around the outside too. And I am leaving a little white border around my wreath heart, just because I didn't want to get too close. I don't want it to feel like it's on a completely yellow background, but just kind of to highlight it. Now, one important thing here, you notice that I turned my work instead of turning my body. Don't be afraid to take your paper and just like swing it around to get to all the sides. And if you feel like you need a little more color, you can wash a little more in. If you feel like you got a little too wet, use a paper towel and dab a little bit away. So even after all this, you'll see that I still have still have that spludge in the middle. So I keep layering some color around the outside and then a little bit more on the inside to create a more of a homogeneous look. I actually added a little bit of orange to the outside too. But just kind of do it the way you like. You don't have to do this wash at all. This is just me showing you very honestly how I problem solved a smudge on my paper, because it happens. So instead of being like cranky pants that you've ruined the whole thing, just find a way to work around it. And then I did use my heat tool to make everything sit down so that I could get to the next part, which is adding some splatters. Now, again, things like the splatters are completely optional, but I like that kind of cottagey look, and so I add them, and it covers up a multitude of sins. And if you like to add splatters, my recommendation is use the colors that are already in your piece. So I used a little bit of the orange that was left on my palette, then I dried it. It's also really nice to dry in between. Then I made up a little bit of purple for the hearts, and I splattered that on and I dried it, and then I added a little bit of green for the leaves. Again, you can see I'm just scribbling it on my ceramic tile. I add a little bit of water, and then I go ahead and just kind of tap that over the top. I do recommend you dry in between, otherwise all of your spatters are going to kind of blend and flow together, which is not really the effect you're looking for. But once it's all done and all dry, we are ready to die cut. So I used the heart-shaped die that I did to draw my template to begin with. And then I also used a love die that I got from Wish. It's one of those cheap off-brand dies. But the first thing you do is you take the background piece or the negative space around the heart and add your foamy tape. And you can see I try to get like around the edges because I do want it to stand up from the background. What makes it an eclipse is that you see the color of the cardstock underneath it, which is why you want to choose like a nice contrasting color. If you just popped it up by like creating multiples, it's not really an eclipse card, it's just kind of a pop-up. But you can see here that it creates this little shadow line underneath. And so I've mounted it to my colored cardstock, and then I'm going to take the heart minus the love sentiment, and I'm going to add glue, and I'm using my favorite On Point glue. I'm going to cover the back of it, and I'm going to mount it right onto the cardstock so it is set down from the background, which is kind of backwards of what you think. And I just weight it down with an acrylic block because now I'm going to go and I'm going to take the cutouts inside the word of the love, and I'm going to tap those into place so they're also sitting down on the base card level. Because, and this seems a little backwards, but I like to do it this way so that when I lift off the love, I really have positioned the negative spaces correctly. Now, this is the fiddliest part of the whole thing. And I know that some people make like little thin foam tape. I don't have that. I'm using what I have available, which is my foamy tape. And I'm going to cut little teeny pieces and I'm going to position it on the love so that the love sentiment pops back up again. And sometimes I have to cut them in half. And when you're all done, if you flip it over, you may see little bits sticking out. You can just use your scissors and trim that away. But then you mount it right over where the colored cardstock is, creating this three-dimensional double eclipse effect. So here you go. I'm not an artist, but I obviously play one on TV, and I'm pretty pleased with my little watercolor marker cabbage roses double eclipse card. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful and informative. Please like and subscribe, and have a crafty day, friends. Bye-bye.